Well, we're making the intensely flavorful chicken piccata in smaller packages. We are actually making chicken piccata meatballs. So I'm happy to be here with you today. Sorry, I'm jumping on a little bit earlier. Normally this starts at 12 o'clock, so I apologize for any of you that really wanted to watch this live. But just my schedule changed a little bit, so I just kind of had to jump on a little bit early. But you can certainly always watch it on the replay and in the recorded version, as well as all of our other videos. I'm Judy Matusky. I'm a registered dietitian, as well as a culinary nutritionist with Athens Nutrition. So I'm happy to be back again today. I'm here weekly around 12 o'clock, and we are always cooking with five-ish, ingredients, but certainly ingredients that most of us are going to have in our pantry. Simple, easy, fast, delicious, and certainly as healthy as we can make them. All right, let's get started. I'm going to just a couple of quick things. I'm using ground turkey. So this recipe, you can go back and forth between ground chicken or ground turkey. I tend to have ground turkey more often than I have ground chicken. I get my ground turkey from Costco. It comes actually in almost a 2-pound block. You can buy I think there's like 6 of them together. So I defrosted that. That's what I have in this bowl. So the recipe calls for 1 pound. When I'm making it, I'm kind of, not doubling, but I'm going to increase the amounts I use because I have more ground turkey here in front of me. So there's really just 2 steps to this, or 2 parts to this. We're making the meatballs, and then we're going to kind of finish it with the sauce. It's a very easy weeknight friendly meal. The flavor's incredible. If you've ever had chicken piccata, it's just intensely flavored with lemon and with capers and olive oil and garlic. It's just so wonderful. So we're going to replicate the same thing by the little meatballs. All right, so let's start with the meatballs. I may not make all of them with this. I might just, I'm going to make some so that we can kind of get things browned off in the skillet. And it's great because this is a 1 skillet meal. So I have a little over, probably like 1.5 pounds of ground turkey here. So we're going to use, it calls for about 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. I have a little more than that. I'm going to just add it. I made my own. These are a little bit on the chunky side. I had some really, really, really crusty whole grain bread that I just blitzed up in the food processor. So I couldn't quite break it all the way down, but that's going to be perfectly fine. The recipe calls for 1 egg. I'm going to go ahead and use 2. Just again, because I have I have a little bit more ground turkey. And like I said, you can go ground chicken, ground turkey, either one. You could make these with lean ground beef as well. It's just not quite the same. All right. So this is about a teaspoon of, just checking my recipes, just to make sure. Yeah, about a teaspoon of garlic powder, not garlic salt, garlic powder. I'm going to use 2. We're a little under. All right. And so we have the eggs, we have the breadcrumbs, the eggs, the garlic powder, and now we're going to add some freshly grated Parmesan cheese. That it's about 1/3 cup, but again, I'm going to use more, so probably a little less than 2/3 cup. Again, that just adds. So this, we're using some salty flavors in here. So we're using capers, we're using, Parmesan cheese, and we're going to be using a chicken broth it is reduced sodium, but. So I am going to very lightly season. I mean, just kind of like a pinch of salt. And then some really good ground pepper. And then we're going to just mix this all together. Not sure I've got everything in here. I do. So it's not a whole lot. So I'm going to go ahead. My hands are clean. I'm going in, and we're just going to mix everything together. Now, this ground turkey from Costco tends to be a little on the wet side. I don't know exactly why, but maybe just I don't think it has any water added to it. I checked the label, but it is a little wet. So I'm hoping that I have enough breadcrumbs in here to kind of handle the wetness, which is fine. They are just a little bit stickier. Yours may not be, depending on the type of ground chicken or ground turkey that you're using. But we're just going to gently sort of mix this around. And when you're kind of mixing with ground turkey and or ground beef, you don't want to over mix it because you want to keep them kind of light and fluffy and tender. All right, that looks pretty good. So I think we're pretty well mixed. Now I'm going to do the best I can. Wet hands are always the easiest way to make meatballs. So I'm going to just rinse and wet my hands a little bit here. Although this is a pretty wet dough, so I'm just going to grab a tiny bit. All right, so it says 1-inch balls. I like my meatballs a little bit bigger. So I think I'm going to make them more like 2-inch. So we're just gonna, you know, bring them together. This is a pretty wet dough. It's gonna hold together. Oh, wet dough. This is pretty wet. The ground turkey here is pretty wet, but it's holding its shape, so that's fine. So we're gonna make these 2-inch. I'm making probably 2-inch. I think the recipe says 1-inch. So meatballs are fantastic because they're such a great little package of protein. This, if you make the 24 meatballs that this recipe says that you would make with 1 pound of ground chicken or ground turkey, each meatball then is about 3/4 of an ounce. So it would be probably 4 of them would be easily a serving for, you know, a woman, you know, depending on your size. But, you know, men might need a little bit more. It's all kind of where our calorie needs and our protein needs are all based on how large our body is and how much, you know, muscle mass we have. So we, anyway, so typically we'd say 3 ounces, you know, maybe 4 ounces is a portion size, 3 ounces for meat or fish or chicken or anything like that. So 4 of these, if you were making the 24 out of a pound, and so that would give you about 3 ounces. And that's great because that's 20 grams, 21 grams of protein. So 3 ounces of chicken or turkey or fish or lean meat is about 21 grams of protein. So these are great little, not only flavor bombs, but really great packages of protein. That's what I love meatballs, and I think kids love them. They're easy. You can do a lot with them. You can freeze them. So this is a great recipe. If you do want to double this, you might want to go ahead and do that because you can double it and then freeze it. Freeze the meatballs, so then you can just pull them out, which is what I typically do. I usually do because I usually have this ground turkey from Costco, so I almost always double this recipe. So I think that's all I'm really going to do for now, just so we can kind of get our browning started. So let me just rinse off my hands, and then I'm going to pull this. I'm going to switch. Let me bring this skillet. I have a good sized skillet that I want to get going. I'm going to let me pull the heat on here. It's kind of medium high. We're going to try to brown these up pretty well. And so medium well. And then if you want to do these in 2 batches, depending on the size of your skillet, I pulled out a pretty large skillet. So I'm hoping that I think because I didn't make all of them, I should be able to get them in there. You don't want to overcrowd, but you want to, you know, if you have to do it in 2 batches, then do it in 2 batches. I think that's what the recipe says. It really depends on the size of your skillet. So you may need to do that. So you would just do a bunch and then flip it out, take them out of the skillet, do your other half. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe because this skillet is pretty big, we might be able to get all of these in here. And then we're just going to put in a little bit of olive oil. It's about, you know, a tablespoon or so. I'm going to use a little bit more because I'm going to do these all in one batch. So I'm going to use at least 2 tablespoons. Plus, I just don't want them sticking. So spread that around. Alrighty. And I just want that heat to come up just a little bit. And let's just talk a little bit about some of the ingredients. So I mentioned that with the breadcrumbs that I made my own, and I typically do that. I like to use always have bread in my freezer. And rather than buying the breadcrumbs from the supermarket, which are usually, you know, I don't know, not very flavorful, and who knows how long they're sitting on the shelf. I like to just make my own. And plus you can use whole grain bread then, and then you're just adding a little extra fiber, a little extra nutrition to your meatballs, and they still come out great. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're using the white bread or whole grain. So like I said, I didn't even have stale bread. I just had whole grain bread in my freezer. This morning, I just took about 4 slices of whole grain bread out of the freezer. I put my oven on warm. I just laid them right on the rack, and I had left them in there for like a half an hour. Then I just turned the oven off and I let them go most of the morning. And then all I did was I just then blitzed them up in my Cuisinart. And what I'll often do, it's just kind of like a good idea. What you might want to do with the same thing, if you want to make breadcrumbs and have them around, just, save all the ends of your bread. I'm going to go ahead and pop these in. You can hear the sizzle. And you want a little space between these meatballs. because you do want them to brown. So I don't particularly want to overcrowd, but I think I can get them all in. Squeeze one more right in here. I think we got it. All right, so I'm not going to disturb them. Let me put this off to the side. Let me just wash my hands real quick. So you want to kind of, when you put them in the pan, you don't really want to disturb them. So just let them go and let them brown, because once you get in there and you try to move them around, they stick and they're going to fall apart. But if you let them go long enough and they really get a nice brown bottom surface, they should release from the pan. They should. They don't always do that. And that's okay, because any leftover ground meat that's in, or ground turkey that's in this pan, is just going to be sort of that fond. It's going to add some rich flavor to this dish anyway, so it's fine. So if they stick, don't worry about it. All right, so typically, so I was saying about bread. So if you have leftover, the ends of your breads, again, food waste. That's just one of my things that I just don't like. I hate wasting food, so I try as best I can to reuse, repurpose. I freeze. I have lots of freezers. I freeze everything so I can use it up later. So I always save just my leftover bread, and then what I'll do is just what I did. I might throw it in my oven even overnight, let it dry out a little bit, put it in the Cuisinart, blitz it up, and then I have so many of these mason type jars in bazillion sizes. I save jars. Then I just label them, put them in the freezer, and then I have breadcrumbs to use they're already available for me. I didn't have any right now, so I had to actually make them this morning, but if you do that, then you always have it. You don't have to buy them from the supermarket. And I find if I buy them from the supermarket, they sit in the pantry, and then they just get even, I don't know, they just taste like the box to me the longer they sit. So anyway, that's something that I love to do. It's a great way, again, not to waste anything. And now, normally when I make meatballs, I almost always do mine in the oven. I usually do them on a sheet tray, like I had lined with parchment. And a really hot oven, maybe 425, let them brown, flip them over, brown them on the other side. That's typically what I do. I just think it's easier, it's not as messy. But because this is like a one skillet dish, I really wanted to not do that. So then that's just an extra tray that we're dealing with. My tray is going to be relatively clean because I had it parchment lined, so it's not like we have all these extra dishes. So, and it takes a little bit longer to do it in the oven. So the idea here is this to be a one skillet meal, which again is helpful. So not only do we want to be cooking with maybe fewer ingredients and still getting great flavor, but we don't, at least I don't want to have a lot of dishes to wash at the end. All right, so these are going around, and when it comes to ground chicken and ground turkey or lean ground beef, unless you're buying the ground turkey breast or the ground chicken breast, the fat content or the saturated fat content is pretty similar to the leanest ground beef you can get. So they're all okay. They're all that's all a good choice. If you want to go really lean, you have to go with the ground turkey breast or the ground chicken breast. Then the saturated fat level is almost non-existent. This was the ground turkey from Costco. I like because the saturated fat content is actually even lower than even a really lean ground beef. So anyway, you can mix and match. From a cardiovascular perspective, you may want to, do the ground turkey breast or the ground chicken breast. The only thing with that is because it is so lean. What I typically do is when if I was mixing that, when I was making the meatballs, I would add a little extra olive oil to the ground turkey breast or the ground chicken breast, because that really does help to add a little more moisture to it. Because the problem with the ground turkey breast or chicken breast is it's so lean that it really can get dry. All right, I am going to turn my heat down just a tiny bit because I don't want to burn anything in here. I'm going to come in here, and they're sticking a little bit, but I'm just going to go ahead and give them a little flip. All right, so I'm just going to brown them on two sides. Because meatballs, it's not like they're square and you can really do all sides. So I typically only do the two sides. So I'm just going to flip them over. They're coming up pretty well. And then once they brown again on the other side, like you can see, it just doesn't take very long because we're going to continue to cook them in the sauce. Right now I'm just trying to, this one's wants to, let me see if I can I'm going to move this one off to the side a little bit. Come in here and see if I can flip this last one that's tucked right here. Okay, get this flipped now. All right, there we go. So let's keep these going. And then what I'm going to do is, because they're not fully cooked, I'm just going to flip my parchment paper over. And when I pull them off, I will just put them, we're going to take them out of the pan, and I'm just going to put them back on the parchment, because even though I had the raw meatballs on this parchment, it's okay because these aren't cooked through anyway. So we're going to need to continue to cook them. So I'm going to let these go for just a little bit longer, just to get that other side brown. And then we're going to remove it, and then we're going to make the sauce. And then this comes together within about 5 minutes. Really, it's not very hard. And we can talk a little bit about the sauce, because what's nice about chicken piccata is because it is very few ingredients. Now, if you're actually making chicken piccata, you wouldn't even have the ingredients that's necessary to make the meatballs, because you don't need that. You're just going to use chicken breast that you're going to be, pan browning in olive oil. So the ingredient list is even shorter. But there's just so many intense flavors in it. That's wonderful. So you have the saltiness coming from, like a little bit of chicken broth, if the recipe calls for it, and from the capers and from the Parmesan cheese. And then you have the fresh sort of tanginess coming from the fresh lemon juice and the lemon zest, and a little white wine that we're adding. So you have these really great flavors coming together for this intense dish with very few ingredients. And it's a very quick one to make. That's what I love about it. So anyway, this is what's great about making recipes when you're trying to cook with fewer ingredients and you're trying to cook relatively quickly. You do want to have those really nice, intense flavors that you're working with. All right, so I am going to, these are probably pretty close, just for time's sake. I am going to take these off and set them aside. My meatballs, I don't know, you probably find the same thing, but they aren't always round. Mine sometimes, can get a little on the flatter side, which is fine. It just depends. It really does depend a whole lot on the wetness, or the moisture content of the ground chicken or turkey you're using. Like I said, Costco's is very wet, so that one could probably take even a little bit more breadcrumbs. All right, so there's a lot of these stuck a little bit to the bottom of this pan. I didn't use if you use a non-skillet, it is kind of foolproof, so you wouldn't have a lot of this, but that's okay, because I'm going to add now, we're going to add a little wine. Calls for white wine. I'm just going to add a little bit right now, just because I want to deglaze this pan, so you can see how it's going to do that. I only have rosé. I don't have any white wine. So any white wine is great. I'm going to go ahead and use rosé. This isn't a sweet rosé, so it'll work fine. So now you're just kind of coming in, and this is what's called deglazing the pan. So I'm just kind of bringing up all of that. Well, it's called fond, which is the browned ground turkey that's in here. That really is going to add a real nice, rich flavor to this sauce. So I'm just trying to kind of scrape that up as best I can. But when you have a hot pan like this, it really will just kind of come right up. And you can see how rich this sauce is. Okay. So that's good. Because that was so hot, I didn't want to add my garlic. I have 2 cloves of minced garlic. The recipe calls for 1, but I think I did 2 because no, I take that back. The original recipe, I felt like it didn't have enough sauce for the meatballs. So I doubled the sauce from the original recipe. and I honestly can't remember where we even found it. It was just probably some random recipe. But so I doubled the sauce so we would have enough sauce for the meatballs. And then if you wanted to serve this over like rice or orzo, or a lot of times I will just steam up broccoli or saute up some greens, and I just kind of serve the meatballs over that. But I'm just going to, for about, just a few, 30 seconds or so, I'm going to just let this garlic kind of cook in here with this sauce just before we start adding everything else. Okay. All right. So I did already add probably a quarter of a cup of wine. The recipe, I think, calls for half a cup. So I'm going to, well, maybe I will measure just so I don't overdo it. So I probably did a quarter cup. So I'm going to do, a little over half a cup, because I'm making probably even a little more of this sauce because we'll have a few more meatballs. All right, so we're gonna get that would be white wine. Like I said, I'm using rosé, but that's fine, I think. Now I'm gonna turn the heat up because I really want this to start boiling. So I'm gonna get my heat up. And now I have the Better Than Bouillon chicken base. Now with this, if you can get the reduced sodium, please do. It really makes a difference, because if you want the intense flavor from this bouillon, but then it limits how much you can add, or sometimes your dish gets too salty. I would rather go low sodium so I can still get the rich flavor, and then add the amount of salt that I feel is needed to bring it up to to the flavor I want without it being too salty. So I'm adding 2 cups of broth, which would be the equivalent of about 2 teaspoons of the base of this chicken Better Than Bouillon base. And then I'm going to add just 2 cups of water to this. And that's going to be the 2 cups of chicken broth that the recipe calls for. All right, but since you don't, with the base, it's nice. You don't even have to mix it into water. You can just add it directly to your sauce. All right, I'm going to crank the heat up even more. Then we're just going to stir this around a little bit. Then we're going to add the juice, about half of a lemon. It's probably like 1 or 2 tablespoons. So just cut your lemon. I am adding the zest at the end. So I already zested this lemon before I cut it, because once you cut a lemon, it's really awkward to try to use your zester around half the lemon. So I already went ahead and did that. So I'm cutting this in half. I would say you're probably going to use a pretty good sized orange. Lemon. It looks pretty juicy. So I'm just going to cup my hand a little bit just to catch some of the seeds that might come through. So this is 1 to 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And then with the lemon, there's actually no seeds in that. I'm going to cut this half and half now, and this is going down my garbage disposal because it smells so good. All right, so that's one over here. And then we're going to add the capers. So this is a nice little salty, flavorful little addition. The recipe calls for 1 whole jar, which a slender round jar is about 3.5 ounces. You would use the whole thing, and you would add at least maybe a tablespoon of the juice, the brining juice that's in here, liquid. This is a big jar. This is from Trader Joe's. So this is like 7 ounces. So I'm going to just use about half of this. And then I will add about, a tablespoon of the brine. So maybe half. I love capers, so I often add even more than what the recipe calls for because they're so good. All right, and then let me just add a little bit of the caper juice. So probably about a tablespoon. All right. So just to recap, because we were kind of adding a whole bunch of different things here. So we have in this sauce, I'm going to review my recipe just to make sure. We had 2 cups of chicken broth. So if you have it already as broth, then use that. If you can get the reduced sodium or no salt added chicken broth, even better, because again, we're using salty ingredients in this, so we don't need a lot of extra salt from the broth. So that's went in. We used about a half a cup of, which you would be using white wine, any wine that you would drink, that's what you would want to cook with, but a white wine is great. And then we added, it would be a full jar, 3.5 ounce jar of capers with about a tablespoon of the brine. And then the juice of about half of a lemon, which is, 1 or 2 tablespoons. It depends. You can add more or less. It's up to you. You can kind of taste it at the end if you want to add a little bit more. And I think that was it. The only thing we did was we added that minced garlic. Once we pulled the meatballs out, we added the minced garlic back in so we could get that, slightly browned up. So now this, you're bringing to a full boil. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the meatballs back in. All right, and then we're going to turn it down, and then they're going to continue to cook. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and just lower these in. Yeah, my meatballs aren't particularly super round, but you know what? They're still going to taste great. All right, so these are now going to need to cook uncovered for about 5 to 7 minutes. And that's just to get these meatballs cooked all the way through. So I'm going to turn it down because we kind of want this kind of coming down to more of a simmer than a boil. So I'm going to turn it down a little bit, kind of let this simmer. And then maybe halfway through this, I'm going to go ahead and flip the meatballs over. And then I'm going to let them cook on the other side because they're not fully submerged in the broth that we're making. And then when they're done, if you want to, you can then remove your meatballs and just put them on a platter. If you want the sauce to get a little bit more reduced, so it's a little bit thicker, just go ahead and turn it up then to a higher boil and let it kind of just, low boil, sort of simmer a little bit over the stove, and it'll start to reduce if you want it to be a little bit thicker. Because when you're making chicken piccata, usually you have some flour involved, and the flour, if you're just making regular chicken piccata, will help to kind of thicken the sauce up when you're using the flour to bread your chicken breast. So, and we didn't really have that, so we might have to reduce this a little bit. But it is a thinner sauce, and that's fine. So then once you're making this, so like I said, serve this. You can serve this as is. You can serve this over orzo, which is, I usually get a whole grain orzo or whole wheat orzo that I love, and then I usually serve it over that. That's probably typical of what I do. And I will saute usually up some greens to go with it. Sometimes I'll just steam up a whole big thing of broccoli, and I'll sort of serve these meatballs sort of over the broccoli with the sauce if we don't particularly want to do the orzo. For the next day, what I do is I usually use these meatballs with a salad. I just eat them kind of cold. I'll make a nice green salad, and then I put the meatballs on top as sort of that protein portion of the salad because they're great cold and warm, or you can even warm them up and then put them on your salad. But lots of different ways to serve them. Again, I think kids will love these. They're so flavorful. If you have any questions, I know I jumped on early today, so I apologize to anybody that was waiting for 12, wanted to jump in live. But again, all the recordings live on the Facebook, our Athens Nutrition Facebook page of all of our cooking videos, except that, I don't know, I feel like that Facebook changed things again. So I felt the videos are a little bit harder to find, but they are there. But we also, all of our cooking videos are also stored over at the Athens Nutrition YouTube channel as well. So you can always watch them. We have many of them now since we've been doing so many of them. As always, please comment, please share them. Please let me know when you make them. I appreciate that so many of you do. And you can give me some suggestions of maybe how you served it, or maybe if you changed anything in the recipe. Just let me know. I'm going to, again, within the next couple minutes, I'm going to turn these over. These will be finished within a few more minutes because it doesn't take long for the meatballs to kind of cook all the way through. And then again, if you want to, you can certainly reduce that sauce a little bit. All right, well, you enjoy your day. Stay well. Remember, cooking is a powerful health behavior. So please spend some time in your kitchen. It doesn't have to be complicated to make really delicious, healthy meals. Stay well. Until next week. Bye-bye.